Next, sir, we have a presidential memorandum for your attention. This memorandum requires the immediate declassification of all FBI files relating to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. This was obviously one of the instances of the weaponization of law enforcement powers of prosecution against you and others. We believe that it's long past time for the American people to have a full and complete understanding of what exactly is in those files.
Which gives the media the right to go in and check it. You probably won't bother because you're not going to like what you see. But this was total weaponization. It's a disgrace. Should never happen in this country. But now you'll be able to see for yourselves, all declassified. Is that correct? Would you
Yes, sir.
say? All declassified?
Yes, sir.
Everything?
The FBI file with there's a classified annex, but other than that, this we'll put everything in the public eye.
Is anybody going to look? Huh? What about you? You going to look? And frankly, the FBI should be ashamed of themselves, and so should the Department of Justice, and so should Biden.
Пробуем хотя бы, что?
And this is very modest. And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff. We start off with a 2.5% base, which is what we were at, and we go to 25%. And basically, as you know, and as you've been seeing, not reporting as accurately as it should be reported because it's a massive story. Business is coming back to the United States so that they don't have to pay tariffs.
Охуеть! Ты шо, блядь, вообще охуевший? Пизда. Ай-яй-яй-яй, сука! Ты какого хуя, сука, руками размахиваешь? Черт, блядь. Ай, блядь! Рот закрыл. Да ты нахуй, пиздар, блядь! Ой, блядь. Ай-яй-яй-яй!
Well, there will be no normalization of relations with Russia when the war is over. That will not happen. That will take decades because there is a total lack of confidence. The threat is still there. As I said in my speech, even if the war comes to a conclusion, the Russian threat is still there. They are building a war economy. They are spending so much money on defense.
First episode and the mic's muted. Welcome to the SCIF. This is the first episode. We won't blackmail you. The SCIF is the special compartmented informational facility. You go in to get all the information. They don't want you to know otherwise, or they do want you to know and then show you something that you did and you're blackmailed for whatever. This is the politician sphere, of course. We're going to have t-shirts to that effect on our cdmstore.net soon. But welcome to the SCIF. We're going to be a new show. We're going to be really bringing you information that you need to know to deal with your daily life in the office, with your friends, with your family. So you're the smartest guy on the block. We got a really big show today on Ukraine. We're going to break some big news that we've been on this story for some time. We're going to delve into the background and then go into what's actually happening here for a second. After the first segment, we're going to have Rob Maness, Colonel Rob Maness. He's a former B-1 crew member and really knowledgeable on what's going on in Iran and across the DOD. He ran for Senate in Louisiana. So we're really looking forward to that the rest of the first hour. Second hour, you're in for a treat. We're going to have the representative from the National Council of Resistance in Iran, the Iranian Resistance on the ground in country. So we're going to talk to them about how to bring down the mullahs from the ground up, from the inside. As Eric Prince said yesterday, a firecracker in the hand versus trying to get into the fist from the outside. That's the way to take down the mullahs and the oligarchy in Iran. And we're going to talk about what's going on in the peace negotiations with Russia. You saw the head of NATO, Mark Rutte. They are saying there'll be no normalization no matter what Trump says. So that's fascinating. We're going to talk about that. We're going to give you an update on the peace negotiations, who's trying to block it, what's going on. So we're going to dig way into that. And it's going to be a fantastic show. So thank you for joining us. Please follow cdm.press. Put us in your daily scan, morning, noon, and night. Check cdm.press for what news you need to know for the day. We don't cover everything. We don't have the bandwidth, but we do cover what's important and what you need to know. And most of the time, I'd say well over half the time, we're different than the rest of Conservative Inc. Or even the legacy media. Of course, we're bringing you stories like the one we're going to talk about in Ukraine here for a second. What's going on there that you really don't know about until you come to CDM. So we're also on podcast. Check us out there. Any of the podcast providers, you can get all of the shows there at cdm.press. So I want to tell you a story. So I was writing for the Washington Times and other people, Newsmax. I was doing some work with them in Eastern Europe after I left Wall Street. I had studied Russian back at the Air Force Academy, and I started spending a lot of time in Eastern Europe, Ukraine specifically, and probably well over a year, close to a year and a half in total, over a decade I spent there and traveled everywhere. I built a team on the ground in Ukraine of sources and intelligence, just so I can prove my bona fides. Here's me a decade ago in Maidan Square in Kiev, and just so you know, I was actually there. And so we traveled to Donbass, we traveled to Mariupol, we traveled all over doing research and talking with people and getting to know the situation on the ground in Ukraine, because it's really important you have reporters on the ground so you know what's happening. And so we've done that. So as we built this network, we started hearing information about American national security officials and corruption in Ukraine. And we learned all about the Burisma issues. We broke a lot of those stories early. And eventually we heard about a story where Ukrainian whistleblowers, guys who wanted to save their country from the globalist influence, were essentially getting approached by the FBI and saying, bring us your information, everything you have. And so they actually flew several times to the United States, once to Washington, D.C., and once into Los Angeles to meet with Department of Justice officials. And our understanding is there was many different agencies there and a lot of different cases were disclosed to the DOJ. And then just so you can, if you go to cdm.press, you can see this story. I'll just bring this up real quick. This is a story we wrote several years ago on the money laundering that we were being told about in Ukraine through the central bank. This image you see is from some Ukrainian investigator files that we were given access to. And it's really a circular carousel, they call it. The U.S. gives aid into Ukraine to the central bank. The central bank then sells these assets off to a third-party broker-dealer that's friendly with the oligarchs. They sell them at a discount, like at 97 out of 100, and they sell them back to the central bank at par, and they pocket the difference. So this was going on under Poroshenko's regime, the previous president, to a massive scale, hundreds of millions of dollars, we're told. So we reported all that, and then we changed gears, and we know this information was given to the Department of Justice. This is another article we put out in 23. You can go there. You can find all of this on cdm.press, by the way. All of this information of the trips of these Ukrainian whistleblowers to Los Angeles and to the Washington, D.C. to provide information to the Department of Justice was given to the House Oversight Committee in late 2023. You can find that article and read it. And then this morning, we have a big event launched today, a big story. And let me bring this up. And this is the FBI agent Jonathan Buma, who was arrested trying to get on an international flight, was involved in bringing those Ukrainian whistleblowers to DOJ and to Los Angeles and Washington back in 2018. So this is really interesting. Why was he arrested? We don't know. We do know that the information that was brought to DOJ would have had impact on the war. The information was suppressed, and the Ukrainians were rebuffed after being promised a working relationship with the FBI. And then, the story just went away. But Jonathan Buma just ends up being arrested. So we find that fascinating. And we're going to stay on this story. Welcome again to the SCIF. We're going to talk with Colonel Rob Maness here and after the first segment. And then we're going to get into the Iran, the MEK issue, the national resistance in Iran. And then we're going to talk about the Ukrainian update on the war, etc. We really appreciate you joining us on the SCIF. This is the first episode. We'll be right back after this short break.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
Pandemic, we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. The stores were shut down and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
So we are in the factory in Kentucky. This is Alp World HQ, and we are at the end of the packing line. So I'm going to show you how it works. We have the card, throw it in there. There's a packing slip, and then you have the Alp. And 4, but that seems honestly like a lot. 3 now, but it's good. You just pack a punch that, for a normal nicotine brand, it'd be like 8. We think 3 is fine. Next one. Again, 4. Let's go 3 in just to keep it fair. Okay? There you go. So you can see you can get fast at this. And really, it's just a matter of repetition. This is kind of the assembly line that, Henry Ford devised so long ago.
Tucker, stealing all the applicants.
We are honored to have with us Colonel Rob Maness, and we're going to dig into a lot of these subjects we talked about before in the first segment. Colonel Maness, thank you for coming on, my friend. I really appreciate your insight.
Hey, it's good to be back with you, Todd.
So I wanted to have you on, first of all, because of what's going on. Diego Garcia is showing satellite imagery of U.S. bombers on the tarmac there. Is that like a signal to the region as to what Trump is maybe planning, or DOD? What do you think?
Well, we don't move 7 B-2 bombers anywhere.
Yeah.
I've never seen that number before, so that's very unusual in its messaging, obviously. And it's not messaging for the Houthis. It's messaging for the Iranians, I'm sure. So for sure, that's what's going on. Now, they don't they don't, that particular platform doesn't survive well in a salt air environment. And as you're probably aware, that runway is right at sea level, and you're taking off and landing over seawater every
Interesting.
time you fly. So they do probably need to get more shelters put up out there. There's a special shelter, pop-up shelter for the B-2 that is deployable. And I think I saw some imagery yesterday that was pretty recent, only showed 3 shelters.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, if they've got them sitting out there in the open, that means they're not going to be there very long. They're probably for some type of specific mission of which we don't know anything about.
So how many B-2s do we have now? Less than 25 operational, right? I mean, I don't know.
We never had more than 20 operationally.
Yeah.
And we've crashed a few. There are always a few that are in heavy maintenance. And quite honestly, it takes a huge effort to put these things into what we call fully combat ready mode. Every time it flies, it becomes non-FMC because of the way the aircraft's built and the capabilities it brings. So it takes a lot of work to get them ready for a combat mission. And they'll be putting a sizable, if they haven't already, I'm sure they have a sizable maintenance team out there if they're going to conduct any long-term operations.
So what are you hearing in your context? I mean, you're an ex-bomber guy. You have your nose to the ground as to hear what's happening with the troops and the force. I mean, is this just? I mean, is there a real effort to go to war with Iran? I mean, what are you thinking?
I'm not hearing anything from inside the Air Force from folks that are flying the jets and those kind of things. But I tell you, it has me concerned. We don't need to go to war with Iran. And this may be related to the breaking news that hit yesterday. I don't know if you saw it or not, but pretty firm report that Israel is ready to go on the nuclear targets in Iran. And we've been expecting that for quite some time. Because the Iranians are, this is Rob's personal opinion, but based on my experience, they've probably got 2 to 3 warheads that are capable of functioning as nuclear warheads. And we know they have the delivery systems because they bought them from the Soviet Union. They're capable of doing nuclear. And the North Koreans have been traversing in and out of there, and we know they're helping them. So it won't surprise me if the Israelis do go ahead and conduct that operation to take down their nuclear capability.
And we know they have the delivery systems because they've used ballistic missiles on Israel in the last year, along with drones, etc. So,
and if I were SecDef, I'd be recommending, in classified settings to the president that we send at a minimum, a very, very big message through our actions to Iran to let them know that if they do anything, that hell's going to come down on them. But 7 B-2s to Diego Garcia is quite a message. Never been done before.
Yeah, hence the B-2s. I mean, that's a third of the force, right? I mean, so that's
probably closer to 50%.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think there's only 14 or 15 that are operational these days. So.
Well, while we're on this subject, what do you think about the new bomber? Have you heard anything about capabilities that's open source, or what are your thoughts on that? You're a bomber guy.
We went down a path that creates a 2-engined miniature B-2 bomber. That's so it's like a stealth F-111, but a little bigger.
So is it more, the F-111, for people that don't know, was just a high-speed, low-altitude bombing platform in Vietnam, right? I mean,
Vietnam in the Cold War, the SAC had some. SAC had some for nuclear purposes. It only carries a few weapons and everything. But the B-21 is going to have a bigger bomb bay, from what I understand. I haven't seen the technical details that have eventually being produced today, but I saw the inputs that went into it when I was at the deputy A58 at the First Global Strike Command staff there, and so it'll be capable. It'll be more capable than the B-2 and the B-1 bomber. A lot of its capability is going to come from how it's integrated digitally into the combat mission, the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance mission. how it can interact with unmanned aerial vehicles and other various forms of 21st century strike packages.
Let's switch gears for a minute, and I'm sorry about all the questions on military, but
Sure.
that's your expertise.
Sure.
So, Gaza, we have a situation where we're trying to get the hostages out. We de-escalated. Israel de-escalated. There was a ceasefire, and then Hamas. The narrative is Hamas basically stopped the process, and then Israel re-escalated, supported by the Trump White House. They're actively involved in air campaigns, ground campaigns. Are we going to get a resolution here? What are your thoughts?
What's your definition of resolution? I mean, my definition of resolution, I've been consistent throughout, is these guys, these Hamas Nazis, and I use that term intentionally. The only way that Nazi Germany was subdued was we required them to unconditionally surrender. Same thing with the Japanese Empire, who are the same type of people. They're horrendously dangerous. They're inhumane. They're evil. Their philosophy is evil. Their governance is evil. Even their citizens took part in this October 7th thing. So laying that groundwork there, my position has been consistent. Israel needs to go and push as hard as it can until they unconditionally surrender, and they literally walk out and put down their arms and raise the white flag, because there's no other outcome that is going to ensure that there is not a viable, I'm just going to call them government military force, because Hamas is the government, and that military force is a real military force. But they're able to use these tactics, like when they go fight, they fight in civilian clothes, so they get counted as civilian casualties. But when they're doing parading and they're returning hostage bodies or fake hostage bodies and all that crap, they're dressed in uniforms. Ever notice that?
Yeah.
So the requirement needs to be unconditional surrender, and this time the Israelis just need to go in and crush it until that's over. And I'm sorry, but that type of warfare that these guys kicked off on October 7, 2023, has some really bad outcomes for civilians. Look what happened in World War II in Europe, places like Dresden, Berlin, and those kind of things. I mean, you have to take it down to the rubble level. And these guys have built massive tunnel infrastructure that we've funded.
Yeah, no kidding.
We funded it, funded the concrete for this stuff. So it's not only buildings and those kind of things, but it's a deep underground infrastructure that's wide, deep, and vast, and it's got to be taken down and eliminated, or this will continue forever. And the Israeli people don't deserve that. The people that live in Gaza that don't agree with them, which there's very few of those, but they don't deserve that either. And it's time to end this stuff.
Well, that brings us to Israel. There's, I don't know if you've been following Qatar Gate, where allegedly Qatar has been funding some of Bibi's staff, money flows. There's a big push to get Bibi out of power. It has been for some time with judicial reform. So you've got kind of two sides of the coin here. He's holding on. He's being investigated. There's big demonstrations still over the hostages, over this Qatar funding. He's trying to fire the head of Shin Bet, the FBI and internal security force. It's just a mess. I mean, they're talking civil war in Israel right now because you've got that kind of split, just like you do in the U.S. Have you been following this at all?
Just peripherally, quite honestly, but I expect that because, under the Obama administration, I guarantee you, he was using the USAID. I always wondered what the infrastructure he was using was when we saw the story break that he was messing in their internal politics to get Netanyahu unseated at that time. And it was USAID, I'm sure. Haven't seen, we've looked at the sheets back on that infrastructure in the way it's been done. So there's some elements of those mechanisms still in play. That's why these crazy judges that we have in America are stopping the Trump administration from cutting off funding and those kind of things. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. Will it go to a civil war internally? I have my doubts about that. But they have a totally different military infrastructure. that involves most of their citizens. So it's a stronger possibility there if there's a wide split amongst the standing forces.
Well, before the
like there
October
was
7th
in
attack,
1860s.
before the October 7th attack, you had certain elements of the force like not reporting to work. It was quite interesting. So you had a literally call it what you want, an insurrection or whatever against the government in power from a military standpoint. And of course, October 7th wiped that all away, and they were all kumbaya after that to have one
Right,
focus.
but we've always suspected there was some kind of shenanigans going on with the indications and warning about October 7th.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
So that's probably got a lot to do with why it doesn't appear the reporting got to the key decision makers that needed to make decisions in a timely manner, including Netanyahu at the time, in order to prevent this widespread massacre. I mean, they were in by the time really any substantive response was able to be mounted. So I'm hoping the Israeli government is seriously investigating those commanders, especially all the way down to the platoon level, to see what was going on there, because it was just for a modern military like the IDF to have been completely flat-footed like that. There had to be some internal situation going on that prevented the right pickup of info, passing of info, and decision makers getting the right info at the right time.
Well, I've said all along that there's no way that there wasn't enough early warning into the system. The question, as you raise, is was it transmitted up to the right people? Who was involved in doing that inside the Israeli government, inside the U.S. government? So I think there's a lot more to see here. And you didn't have a response really militarily for like 7 hours.
Right.
I mean, it was not cool. And so I think this was enabled in some way. I'm not accusing anyone specifically. We need to know what the heck went on, because that has implications for us, because we're in a big war, or could be. We got 100,000 troops, multiple aircraft carriers over there right now. Diego Garcia, bombers on the ground. So we could get pulled into something big, and we got to get to the bottom of that. And just like in the U.S., I think in Israel, you're seeing that process work its way to the conclusion. What do you think?
Yeah, and I would just add to that, overlay what's going on there with the potential of what could happen here, and can we trust every single layer of our indications and warning, our intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance apparatus that's supposed to keep us safe from a major attack internally? And it's a major issue. You got former CIA targeter Sarah Adams out there on Sean Ryan's show a lot, and others, not just her, but calling it out, saying, "Hey, look, we don't know how many thousands of Islamist terrorists are inside this country now because of the last 4 years, especially because of the Afghanistan fall, those kind of things. I think it could be over 10,000 just of the primary fighters that are here." And she's anticipating that there's going to be a massive October-style attack that's going to be much more large, obviously much larger and more deadly than what happened on October 7th, but inside the United States.
Yeah.
And when you lay that over, and then you look at what happened with Israel, with the command and control, the indications and warning, and knowing that the United States is partly responsible for the indications and warning at the strategic level, especially to help Israel, because we have an agreement with them to do that. And you start scratching your head and going, all right, where are these gaps? Who was responsible for those gaps? What entities and what people specifically? And are those people still here? It's great that President Trump won, but we're in a precarious situation. The same with the signal gate BS that's going on this week is a big red flag for me. To remind people that we are in a very precarious situation when it comes to the type of attack that the Sarah Adamses and Scott Manns are anticipating are being planned and are going to be executed on our own soil.
Well, we're also in an information war, which ties directly into what you're saying. Colonel, you can stay for one more segment, right?
Yeah.
We'll be right back with the SCIF after this break.
emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
True life Alp story. I got a call from a friend of mine yesterday, honestly, true story, who said his girlfriend had just broken up with him over Alp. He wouldn't stop. And I thought to myself, that's kind of sad. And he said, no, it's not sad. Imagine if I'd married her. Now I know I was saved. Then the next day, this same friend is driving at twice the speed limit through a major American city, pulled over by a cop in a speed trap. Cop takes his license registration, goes back to the patrol car, runs him, comes back, looks in the window, and sees a tin of Alp on the dashboard. Pauses, stunned, says to my friend, "You use Alp?" "Yeah, I do," says my friend. "So do I," says the cop. "We all do." He looks at my friend thoughtfully and goes, "Drive safely, sir," and hands back his license and registration. No ticket. So in 2 days, he's saved from a tragic marriage to a girl who doesn't like Alp and a speeding ticket. All true. It's more than a nicotine marriage.
So, Rob, let's talk about the Signal thing. Signal is well known by everybody. Everybody uses it. It's not that secure. I think everybody knows that. So I find this really bizarre. I mean, either this is just extreme incompetence or it was on purpose in some kind of operation to out certain people. What do you think? I mean, I just find it really strange what's going on here, that the National Command Authority is on Signal on their cell phones. What do you think?
I'm not surprised that they're on Signal. Matter of fact, I wasn't even surprised when we saw Ratcliffe, the CIA director, testify yesterday that, hey, Signal's on every government phone platform, on all of the CIA's computers, and it's used prolifically. It's an end-to-end encrypted chat capability and phone call capability. So it's not secure in the sense of a Stu 3, which isn't necessarily that secure either anymore, but it is end-to-end encrypted. It's hard to break into, but the way to break into it is the part of the story that's not being paid attention to, and it's the part of the story that should be being paid attention to. And you touched on it, is how did this reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine, the guy responsible for Russia hoax, for Suckers and Losers, the same guy individually, this man, how does he get added into this chat? That's the real issue that's not being really talked about a lot in the media. The media's going, I saw the New York Times and Wall Street Journal going after Hegseth today. And so the overlying thing of this is it's an op that we've seen before. That's why Goldberg's involved. And that's why he delayed reporting on it until just the day before. Gabbard and the whole national intelligence team were going into Congress to brief up the new intelligence capabilities assessment that they just released a couple of days ago. So on our adversaries, because they wanted this to hit for that, so they would have to speak to it, because they're going after Hegseth, they're going after Waltz, and look, I don't care whether you agree that the president made Mike Waltz his national security advisor or Hegseth is SecDef. It doesn't matter. They're going after him. It's an op. It's an op from the intelligence community, just like they did against Trump several times in his first administration, just like they continued to do for the 4 years when he was out of office. They're continuing to do this, and it's obvious. So that's the overlying thing. But that's not the important thing, because everybody knows that. The normal people in America that go, oh, wow, this looks vaguely and smells vaguely familiar, they know that. The piece is, how does Goldberg get put into an end-to-end encrypted chat group that's a principals committee? Okay.
Yeah. Vice President, SecDef, all of them.
Committee, and there's the deputies committees. They're the ones that make all the day-to-day decisions, and this is the principals committee. So it's the actual people, SecDef, vice president, that are just below the everybody but the president, essentially. Even Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, was in there, and she's representing him. Okay, so So how does this guy get put in there? Is it inadvertent? No. But Mike Waltz himself brought up some good questions the other night. I think he was on Laura Ingraham. He said, well, one of the questions is the apps are on my phones when I get them, when I get handed to them. Was this guy in the contact list on that phone? I don't know. He said, I don't know. But somehow my phone added this guy. I must have, he took responsibility. But
so it was his phone, because I've heard there was some like, Chinese staffer or whatever that Laura Loomer's all over that. Have you read about that?
The principal, he's not a staffer. He's the number 2 guy. He's the deputy national security advisor. He's the principal deputy national security advisor to the president of the United States. Alex Wong is his name, and he is of Chinese heritage. It's my understanding from what I knew before Loomer's reporting on it and everything. I mean, he's the guy. When you look at the screenshots from Goldberg's phone, Wong is in there. And he's the guy that Waltz tagged when they set it up. When you read the thread, as he's going to be speaking for me, Alex Wong. So, I mean, that's the right concept and everything. But Alex Wong probably had control over the government phone too, that set the chat up and those kind of things, since he was named as that guy. You know the drill.
Sure.
Here, hand it to my exec and say, hey, or my vice, and say, hey, take care of this. I'm doing such and such, and those kind of things. So, and they have complete access to him. So somebody added him in from Waltz's phone, because when you look at the screenshot for Goldberg, it says Mike Waltz added you.
Right.
So that's the real issue. And then a secondary piece to that issue is, did Jeffrey Goldberg violate the Espionage Act by withholding the information when he should have reported that he had access to this information?
You mean once he had the info, he should have turned it in immediately?
Yeah. He should have turned it in immediately as an American citizen and said, hey, time out. Somebody needs to know this. But he didn't. He held it. And it's clear in the Espionage Act that if you withhold information that's critical to the security of the United States of America, and you know you have it, and you think that's what it is, it's a violation of the National Security Act. So
is there a press exclusion for that? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Like the Pentagon files that were Pentagon papers that were sent to the New York Times back decades ago. I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, we've always worked with the press internally, where when somebody from the Pentagon calls the press and says, hey, we've got this information and we want to help you with your report, but we need to embargo it for like a week, which is what would have been said to this guy had they known he was in there. They'd have just said, hey, this is embargoed until X day.
Right.
And then you can talk about it. So we have those kind of relationships with those kind of folks. And look, Secretary Hegseth is in that chat. His phone's the one that put the information that a lot of people are freaking out over, which is not classified. Is it sensitive considering the timing and everything and what was going on? Yeah, it is. But there's no specifics in there.
It's the old the classification schedule, sensitive.
Yeah.
So it was.
If people would just read the guidance. There's words like specific in front of all of these things that they're saying are classified information.
Right.
And those kind of things. So, but he's the important part of that. Reason I bring that up is he's the original classification authority over that information. So if he puts it in there, he's putting it in there as the person that classifies that type of information anyway. And he's saying, you're cleared to use this. I mean, that's just the way it works.
Well, you bring up a good point that it was his phone, but not necessarily him that added Goldberg to the chat. So that's an important distinction that someone did it.
Yeah. And you've probably seen Loomer's reporting on Wong. I mean, I knew this before she actually reported, but he's a Romney campaign guy, advisor kind of thing. He was pretty young then, but I mean, he's young now, really. I didn't even look at it when they appointed this guy. And I'm like, man, that guy's really young. When I saw that, I'm like, why the hell is he the principal deputy? Are we making people that have no experience the principal deputy national security advisor? Why are we doing that? I mean, that's one of the questions I have. Is why are we doing that? There's a lot of people that are really smart that have a lot more experience that are trustworthy too, that should be filling that role, not some young kid. And maybe it's because I'm over 60 now and I feel like everybody, I don't know.
We had to walk for miles of snow to school, right?
Exactly. Both ways, barefoot in the wintertime. But there's other things about his background. He's a Romney guy, campaign guy. So that's kind of his core, where he's at. So that puts him at odds ideologically with MAGA. Period.
Yeah.
Very few of those people are going to agree ideologically with President Trump's policies and the way he wants America to be doing business right now. So that raises a little bit more of a red flag on this guy. And I'm not saying he did anything nefarious. I'm not. I'm just saying these are things that really should be being looked at by that team. That team needs to really
Laura's point, who the hell
report on this and fix whatever the problem was.
Yeah, that's what Loomer's saying. She's like, who the hell's doing the vetting in the White House? I mean, so it's
yeah. There's a lot of resumes in the system. A lot of people that volunteered to serve, and you got I don't know how many people are in the presidential personnel office right now, but they did a really good job, I think, on most of the stuff they were doing down at Mar-a-Lago when the transition team was in charge, and then Sergey Ogor is in charge of the presidential personnel office. I know he's a solid MAGA guy. I know him personally, but he doesn't have a huge team, I'm sure, at this point. And they got thousands and thousands and thousands of things to get done, people to get hired, positions to get filled, and is the vetting as solid as it was for the first 30 people? Probably not.
So I want to talk Ukraine and a couple others. Can I get 10 more minutes from you?
Yeah, but let me go back to that for just a second.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind, though, I said that, but Wong was appointed the same day that Waltz was, back in November, I believe. So the original team did this vetting.
Yeah.
It's not the team.
I don't know the guys.
I don't know him either. I just know the background on him, and he's not exactly from his core experience a MAGA policy guy or America First policy guy.
Rob, we're going to take a quick break and a few more minutes after that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I'll be right back on the SCIF.
I'm watching my friends gain more and more weight. And then eventually, I got to tell you, this is a little dark, but bad diet literally killed my whole crew.
Wow.
Diabetes, a stroke. I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's like, you had a stroke? You're not even 50 years old. You guys got to quit eating this stuff. Your body knows what's what. You're not conscious of this. But that's why people will go to the refrigerator and they'll grab this and that and the other and put together this outrageously elaborate combination of foods. Your body's trying to reach balance. Unbeknownst to us, our bodies are always trying to reach homeostasis. You can't eat all of this stuff and expect to live a long time. And one thing led to another, and I went, forget this. We're going to make our own product. So we partnered with one of the world's top 3 biochemists where nutrition-specific study is concerned. I said, all I want is the best nutritional and immune support product in the world. So we mixed it in yogurt. It's a powder. I got a bag of it here. I keep one on the console all the time, just so I can show people.
Yeah.
And it's a powder. Now, this is not candy. This is hardcore nutrition. And sugar is an enemy. And most people do not know that the reason these bellies are showing up on people all over the place, your body makes fat to store the toxins it can't get rid of. So it just puts them over here. But I can tell you this, you take this for 30 days and then lay off of it for 2 or 3 days, and you'll go, good grief, give me some more. Skin, nails, hair growing back, cut yourself and it heals in half the time.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big proud American Eagle logo.
We're slogging over Africa. Foot, slogging over Africa. Boot, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. 7, 6, 11.
So, Rob, let's talk Ukraine. You've got a major push to stop any peace negotiations. You got Root out of NATO saying, no normalization of relations with Russia, even if the war ends, even if there's a ceasefire. You've got Canada and the EU looking to move as many weapons and money into Ukraine as they can to keep this going. I find this pretty nefarious. I mean, you may have an opposite opinion, and that's fine. But what do you think about this?
Oh, it's nefarious, and actors from within the United States government and tangent, and close to the United States government, previous government officials like Victoria Nuland are behind it.
Yeah,
there's no doubt in my mind. They continue this farce of unprovoked aggression. Look, I don't agree that he went into Ukraine this in February 2022. There were options there that didn't have to go that far, but you can't say it's unprovoked. Sorry, I'm not buying it. And this is a continuance of that. Now, having said that, these European punks, and that's what they are. They're punks.
Yeah, they are.
Relative to America and the President of the United States and our capabilities and everything. They're just punks. And they're doing a lot of talk. I think there's a couple of objectives here. One of them is likely the objective to scare the American people back to the old mindset of, wow, if we're not leading NATO and have a strong presence in Europe and everything, we could end up sending American boys and girls nowadays in to die by the hundreds of thousands again, like we had to do in World War I and World War II to save them. I think that some of what you're seeing is a major, it may be all of it really, is a major influence operation on the American people to put pressure on Trump and the administration to not back off. That's number one. Number two, the reality of what people like you and me have been talking about, and hundreds of other people that have just tried to be objective about this whole thing. The reality is that the Europeans are weak. You mentioned Canada. I almost broke out laughing. They have like 3 rusty submarines, dude. They have 65 CF-18s that over half of them aren't even FMC, can't be made FMC. So they got the equivalent of a couple of squadrons of CF-18.
That's why Chrystia Freeland wants British nukes to protect Canada.
The British nukes? Well, they're rented from the United States of America. Just go talk to John Conrad. Go read John Conrad.
Talk about a kill switch.
Yeah. I mean, they're rented from us, just like there was reporting, I think it was 3 days ago or so, that the German chancellor said, well, we'll just give them our nuclear weapons, talking about the Ukrainians. And, it's not real high on my resume, but I was the sole executive oversight over the NATO nuclear command and control system when I was on the joint staff as a major. That's how important we put the nuclear capability, the importance level of the nuclear capability of NATO on it. But none of those weapons belong to anybody but the United States of America. And we have the kill switch, use your words. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
So you have weapons to give Ukraine. And if you try to give our weapons to Ukraine, we're going to stop you.
Well, you put your head on, or your finger on it, the information operation you're talking about, because my view is this whole thing is from the grand scale a way to tie up the United States and Europe, in addition to other agendas to, hurt Russia, et cetera. But I think the Chinese are behind this in a big way with Biden in the White House to get this war going, to deplete our stores, to, make us weak, spend our money. And now you have that same apparatus trying to scare the American public that we got to keep this war going, or, we can't lose NATO leadership and all that. So I see that it's so clear to me. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, in my view.
Yeah. And there's so many holes in
yeah.
There's somebody like Putin's going to take the rest of Europe and take.
He can't even take Donetsk.
He can't take Kiev and keep it. And I say Kiev because I don't buy this bullshit about changing the pronunciation of things. He can't take Kiev and keep it. Look, I'm not discounting the capability of the Russian armed forces.
It's much better now than the beginning of the war.
It's better than it was in February 2022, but it is back to the Soviet style warfare, which is grind it up with artillery and everything you can from the air, and then move your infantry and your armor in inches. It's a game of inches for the old Soviet strategy,
but it's working right now.
It eventually works. So he may not be able to take Kiev and all of Ukraine in a day or even a year, but eventually he will if you don't stop the damn war. I mean, that's kind of where Trump's team is coming from. I mean, that's why I voted for him and support people like Elbridge Colby and those kind of things, because they understand that reality. And the reality is what we need to be making our decisions from, not wishful thinking and those kind of things. Now, as far as the Europeans go, look, the Germans can say all they want about giving nukes to them and everything, but the reality is, here's some reality for you. They've spent more on Russian natural gas than they've given to Ukraine in defense stores in dollars.
Surprise,
Think
surprise.
Yeah. So, and we've been saying that since from the get-go, Todd, when it looked like the alliance was going to fracture completely because Biden's team was incapable of pulling it together at the beginning of all this in February and March of 2022. And I think the thing that saved them is they told Boris Johnson to go in there and tell Zelensky, you're not going to, fulfill the Turkey plan, the Istanbul plan. You're going to back off of that, because he was going down that road, and that pulled the alliance. That provided some forcing function to pull the alliance together. But they were fracturing because the Germans' economy is linked to the Russian economy, and it still is. I just said that. Those numbers, the facts that they've spent more on Russian natural gas are from a couple weeks ago, not a year ago or 2 years ago. So people say a lot of things in politics, both here internally, but don't listen to what politicians say. Watch what they do, and what countries like Germany are doing is saying that Russia's not really the threat we're saying it is.
Yeah, and speaking of Boris Johnson, I love this meme. It's like, "Dobre den, everybody. Good night, everybody." Like, kept the war going, but like, see ya, good night. So, wow, yeah. So I see that across Ukraine. One more thing, DEI. Where are we? How are we in the U.S. Armed Forces at this point? We're ripping this stuff out. You got a lot of people trying to keep it there. What do you think?
I have in my hand a letter that I got from General Bishop, who's the head of STARS. As you know, we're both involved in STARS. At stars.us, folks, if you want to go help the organization that is responsible for having a Secretary of Defense that is anti-woke. Now, I mean, they are solely responsible. I'm proud to be just a tangential part of that team. I have a memo that General Bishop put out from this morning. I got it. It's dated the 5th of March, though, from Sergeant Major U.S. Marine Corps Troy Black. Troy is the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It's a 2-page memo. The joint non-negotiables. It talks about who we are, what our non-negotiables are, core values, and our foundations. There's not one word about how diversity is our strength in here. It's all about, hey, listen to this. Each branch of the armed forces has its own core values, but at their heart, they build toward our central themes: duty, honor, courage, and commitment to mission, country, and each other. and each other. And the memo goes on to talk about discipline and standards, leadership's an obligation, not a privilege, lethality and deterrence through strength. And the standard is very simple. It's victory. That is the most positive sign that I've seen from within the uniformed part of the Secretary of the Department of Defense, that the culture shift is happening back towards the American warrior ethos and away from cultural Marxism that we've been warning people that the armed forces is using and going down a path. Now, having said that, I am seeing active duty officers and senior enlisted make comments publicly on social media and at events publicly opposing the current president of the United States and our policy.
Yeah, they need to be removed
publicly.
Immediately.
Yeah. If I had done that in the Clinton era, I would have been out as a first lieutenant, captain type.
Well, I mean, they had to send memos. I mean, we're in the same year group. I mean, they had to send memos. You can't talk bad about the president. You remember that?
Yeah, I'm sure you were in a squadron where the air crews were all brought in, and the squadron commander stood in front of him and said, "Have you heard of Article 88 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice? Well, here it is. Knock it off." You know, because they knew what was happening, and that needs to be implemented and enforced once again. I mean, it is what it is. You know, and but what I'm hearing from people that have left, I left the service in late 2011, and I'm hearing from folks that left a lot less time away from that, that they're watching people they know publicly do this that are still on active duty. And that's very unusual. We didn't do that in the Clinton era. I mean, we would have conversations in private, you know, those kind of things, but never at a public event in uniform, those kind of things. So we've got a problem there. This is a good start, but it's only a start. I've been impressed by it, but it's only a start. And you can't implement this all the way from the top down. You know that because it's got to also be implemented at the bottom and then carried by the NCOs.
Yeah, and it has to be, accountability and the OPRs, performance reports, all that stuff. It's got to be at the lower level. You're right.
And this memo from the sergeant major will do that, get it down to the NCO level and down to the E1 level very quickly. But the officers have to support the president of the United States. I mean, it's a part of our professional. It's part of our professional ethos that we support and defend the Constitution of the United States, no matter who's elected to office.
Exactly. And the MacArthur Society at West Point and the Calvert Group at Navy. Let me just highlight those two organizations as well, along with STARS, which is really kind of trans service, but it's the bigger one. But those, I know that MacArthur, I know them well, especially have done a good job at West Point getting the duty honor country stuff on board back. Rob, anything else you want to get out, and where do people follow you? I really appreciate you coming on. I'm always honored to have you because your insight is spot on. But how do people keep in touch?
Hey, my show's Monday through Thursday live on Worldview Tube. You can follow Worldview Tube on X. Follow me on X at Rob Maness, and the other social medias too. We broadcast the show to all of my social medias that are capable of doing it, including my Rumble channel, the Rob Maness Show. Has the live broadcast, and then we put up the post-production episodes up too, and my website, robmaness.com.
Rob, we'll have you back down the road. Thank you extremely much again. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Todd.
Ciao. Take care.
Okay, ready?
Ready.
So we're out in the field in South Dakota shooting pheasants, and we're coming out here to a Milo field you can see behind us, and I was throwing in an ALP. Someone else was using a tobacco product, and then somebody, and I'm not going to name names, pulled that out in public at a hunt. And so that's obviously yesterday. What we have here, ALP, is tomorrow, and we're going to make that official by symbolically ending the long reign of this product. Willie Robertson happened to be hunting with us. We don't have a mechanical fur, but we do have former U.S. Senator Rick Santorum of Pennsylvania. With an arm. Willie's got a 12 gauge. I've got my trusty 20. and we're going to see what we can do to usher out the Zen aircraft. Yes! So, I should say, alppouch.com, for sale now, alppouch.com. Usher in tomorrow a brand new world of nicotine pouches, the American Lip Pillow, on sale now. Warning! This product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big proud American Eagle logo.
So I'm just hearing from our representative from the National Resistance in Iran. I think we sent them the wrong link, so we're going to resend that to them right now and make sure that he's coming on. So sorry about all the production as we go, but we want to talk about Iran because it's a huge issue as far as are we going to get in another major war? And I'm just telling him to check this link. Thank you for hanging out with us today and bearing with us. But Iran is a big issue. We don't want to get in another war, but we want to find out how we can take down the regime from the inside. And I wrote a book recently about this, Paying the Price, The Untold Story of the Iranian Resistance. You can order that now at historyofbooks.com. You can get it anywhere books are sold, and you will learn a lot about the way to really solve this issue from the inside and not via a war with the regime. So I'm going to bring on Ali Safavi now, a good friend of mine. Ali, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time and always enjoy your insight. And I wanted to have you on because I wanted to hear what you think about what's going on the ground in Iran and with all the buzz about possibly attacking their nuclear facilities. You guys were the one who brought out the nuclear facilities years ago. So kudos for that. And you've dropped more information recently, but tell us what's happening on the ground.
Sure. First of all, Todd, thank you very much for having me on. It's great to be with you as always. And I think you asked a very good question. Actually, as we speak, the situation in Iran, of course, is quite turbulent. Mm-hmm. Case in point, the latest figures on executions were released. And in the Iranian Persian year that just ended on March 20th, the Persian year 1403, which is from March 20th, 2024 to March 20th, 2025, no fewer than 1,153 Iranians were executed by the Iranian regime. Mm-hmm. 961 of them during the 8 months that the so-called moderate president Ahmadinejad, Pezeshkian has been in office. There are 38 women, 7 juvenile offenders among them. And this marks a 42% increase relative to the number of executions the previous year. Mm-hmm. And this speaks volumes about the trepidation and the regime's fear of eruption of another uprising in Iran, like the one we saw in 2022. And naturally, Iranian officials have said that if something like that erupts, it will be far more extensive and far more ferocious. And this, of course, comes in a situation where the regime is far weaker
and more vulnerable than it was in 2022, because as you know, not only the Hezbollah has been decapitated, not only the Houthis are now under tremendous military attack by the United States, but most importantly, the regime lost its linchpin of its regional strategy, Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And a lot of people are now questioning even the wisdom of Iran's 11-year involvement in that country, the wasting of $50 billion worth of Iranian money, the loss of somewhere between 6,000 to 15,000 IRGC, including 34 brigadiers general that were killed during the conflict there. And so indeed, the situation is very volatile. Alongside what I just told you about the repression, last year saw a tremendous rise in the activities of the MEK-affiliated resistance units. They carried out 3,077 operations against the IRGC bases, the paramilitary Basij, and other security organs of the regime. And they also engaged in some 8,000 acts of defiance, like writing graffiti, furling huge banners of the resistance's leadership from bridge overpasses, and torching the symbols and the pictures of the regime leadership.
Which is a big deal because they could be executed for that. Right?
Absolutely, yes. And remember that this is being carried out under an environment of absolute repression, with a lot of CCTV cameras, with on foot patrols by the Basij and other security agencies and things like that. So yes, indeed, in fact, they are risking their lives, but they have continued to do that despite everything that the regime has done to prevent them from happening. And there are always directives issued to the security forces warning of continued activity. So in this sense, the situation is very volatile. And when you add to that the economic problems that Iran faces, like the Iranian rial, the official currency, is now being exchanged 1 million rials to $1. Just to give you a sense of how bad the situation is, when before Pezeshkian took office 8 months ago, the value of rial was 580,000 rials to $1. So it has lost almost half of its value just in the past 8 months. And the minimum wage the regime announced for average worker is about 10 million rials, whereas the food basket, the minimum food basket for a family of 3 is 30 million rials. So you can see that even the wages are 1/3 of what it costs to feed a family of 3. And of course, there has been tremendous infighting. Just last month, the Iranian Minister of Economy was impeached. He was before the head of the central bank. And during the impeachment hearing, he said, "Why are you blaming me for all this mayhem in the Iranian economy? Some 20 million liters of gasoline are being smuggled every day. And do you know who does that?" Of course, he meant the IRGC, because it's the IRGC that controls all the... He said, "You don't carry around 20 million liters of gasoline on horseback. You put them in these huge trailer tractors and take them." And so IRGC controls that. So when you look at the domestic scene, I think the time is very, very volatile, very sensitive, very critical. And of course, as you said, we are very busy at work inside Iran and trying to organize the opposition to the regime. And of course, the developments outside Iran naturally have a direct bearing on the pace of events within the country.
So I'm going to ask about the Houthis. I mean, there's a narrative now coming out in Iran is saying, well, we don't support them. We don't provide weapons. That's not true, right? I mean, the regime is funding and arming the Houthis. Am I right?
Well, in a nutshell, the Houthis are a brainchild of the regime in Iran. The leadership, including their founding leader, Badruddin Houthi, went to Iran. His 2 sons Hussein Houthi and the current leader Abdul Malik Houthi. Both were in Iran. They are from the Zaydi branch of Islam, which is the Shiite branch, which believes in 4 imams. But of course, the traditional Shia believe in 12 imams. They call them 12ers. And so they sort of converted from Zaydi to 12er, the Ja'fari, if you will, branch of the Shia sect. And basically all of their ideological training, military training, funding, equipment, everything is sent by Iran. In fact, we revealed just a couple of weeks ago that Brigadier General Shahlai, who was a deputy to Qasem Soleimani, the eliminated commander of the Quds Force, runs the show in Yemen. And in fact, when the Americans hit Soleimani in Baghdad, they also wanted to hit Shahlai, but he miraculously escaped. And so this notion that the Houthis are an independent entity is like saying Hezbollah is an independent entity, whereas Hassan Nasrallah was on TV saying that even our underwear is paid for by the regime in Iran, as so long as the regime has money, we're fine. And so one scoffs at this idea that the mullahs are saying that the Houthis are independent. The whole formation of their military, these were a bunch of ragtag, if you will, Bedouins in Yemen, and the regime has now transformed them into a formidable military force with enormous missile capability, drone capability, intelligence capability. As you have seen, they have wreaked havoc in the Red Sea and have basically paralyzed the commercial shipping. And so nobody buys.
That's a good point, because the Houthis have been, they're not a slouch. I mean, the Saudis have been fighting them for some time, and they're still there. They're still shutting down shipping in the Red Sea. So you had Mike Waltz on the Signal chat, which was released, saying only the Americans can stop this. I mean, do you think they will be able to degrade them militarily?
Well, obviously, at least from the public reports that I have seen, the Houthis seems to have received some serious blows and some setbacks. But at the end of the day, Todd, as I'm sure you know, and you've said this many times, the head of the snake is in Tehran. And as long as this snake continues to breathe, these problems will not go away. It's like the role that Moscow was playing for communism during the Soviet era. The regime in Tehran is basically the godfather of extremism and Islamic fundamentalism. So that's where I think the focus should be. Naturally, we as the Iranian opposition are not advocating boots on the ground. Interestingly, when the president of our council, NCRI, Maryam Rajavi, was testifying before a House hearing back in February, she was asked directly by Representative McClintock, Republican of California, what would you like the United States to do? And Mrs. Rajavi said, first, let me tell you what we do not want from the United States, which is military support, which is financial support. But we think it is critical to be done both by the US and Europe, is to first recognize that the Iranian people have the right to overthrow this regime. Secondly,
which has not been accepted really in the West.
No, because even the Trump administration that has imposed the maximum pressure policy, it is doing so with the aim of bringing the mullahs to the negotiating table. But if history is a judge, the mullahs will never negotiate. They will never give up their weapons program. They have the experience of Gaddafi, and they know what happened to him, and they have Ukraine before their eyes, and look what's happening in Ukraine. And of course, they also have the experience of the Shah, which is they will not let go of repression. They will not abandon the nuclear weapons program. I think what Mike Waltz said the other day on CBS is a very correct demand: the total dismantlement of Iran's nuclear weapons program, enrichment, weaponization, missile, warhead, all of that. But the mullahs are not going to give that up, because if they do give that up, then they will lose the only strategic guarantee they have to preserve the regime, because
Yeah.
as you know, they have been dangling this nuclear, if you will, card in front of the international community, in front of the Europeans. Remember that during the Obama administration, nothing was done about Iran's nefarious activities in the region, about its atrocious human rights abuses inside Iran. Why? Because they said if we address those issues, it might upset the Iranians and they may walk away from the negotiating table. So clearly, I think now time has come for the international community, for Europe, for the United States to say, look, Iranians have as much right to liberate themselves from the clutches of the mullahs as people elsewhere around the world have. And they must recognize this as legitimate. And they must also recognize the fight of the resistance units against the Revolutionary Guards. I think that would, in a sense, send the signal first to the Iranian people that they are not alone and that they can step up their activities, but also it would send a signal to the regime in Tehran that they cannot act with impunity. After all, none of the regime leaders has been brought to accountability despite so many crimes against humanity they have committed, the acts of genocide, the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners just in 1988.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that the international community can do short of wanting to put boots on the ground, because we have the experience of that, the disaster in Iraq and elsewhere. So from
Oh,
our
and you had it in Iran in 1979 as well.
Yes. So our experience, in a sense, you know, the narrative that the regime has been pushing in all these years and fed by its talking heads, both in the think tank community and in the media and so forth, is that in Iran, there is no organized, credible, viable, democratic alternative.
Yeah.
And of course, as long as people believe that, then real politics dictates that we deal with the devil we know. But that cannot be, nothing can be farther from the truth, that there is an organized, structured, popular, capable alternative that is not only active inside Iran, as I enumerated. They were active last year in 135 cities across the country, in all 31 provinces, but it has tremendous recognition abroad, as you have seen in some of the events that it has organized. There were thousands of people in Washington just this past March 8th. There were even a larger crowd in Paris a month before, on February the 8th. 137 former world leaders have endorsed a statement supporting Mrs. Rajavi and her 10-point plan for a free democratic republic in Iran. And bipartisan members of Congress, just right now as we speak, 174 members of the House have introduced a resolution, HRES 166, that supports a democratic republic in Iran and endorses Mrs. Rajavi's plan for the future of Iran. So the alternative exists. It has international recognition. It has a popular base inside Iran. And unlike the remnants of the monarchy, the Shah's son, who is begging.
I was going to ask you about that. There's a big push. I see it a lot in the press to bring the monarchy back.
Yes.
What do you think of that?
I think when it comes to any real game plan about the future of Iran, the monarchists and son of the Shah don't have even a seat on the bench. Remember, if you ask or someone, where does son of the Shah gets his fame from? Well, from his father's infamy. He's the son of a deposed and detested and corrupt dictator whom Iranian people overwhelmingly booted out of the country 46 years ago. He has not at all criticized his father's practices, the abuses, the torture of the SAVAK, the Shah's dreaded secret police, many of whose members now are actually working with the Iranian intelligence services. And he really doesn't have any base of support inside Iran. And his strategy, actually, to bring about change in Iran is to rely on the IRGC, the very force that has been brutalizing and murdering Iranians, especially killing women, shooting them in the eye. And you saw in 2022, they killed 750 protesters.
I don't think people really understand, Ali, that the youth in Iran really don't have a future. They have nothing really to live for, so they have nothing to lose. So the resistance is a very young movement. I mean, and it's very female also.
Yeah,
which people don't
exactly.
understand.
You brought up a very good point. Actually, it is the women who are leading this resistance. As you know, you have come and seen Ashraf 3, where the movement is led entirely by women, and of course that serves as tremendous inspiration to Iranian women, because they bear the brunt of the regime's suppression, with the forced veiling and all the other discrimination that is imposed on them. Which is why now, actually, the initial slogan of Women, Life, Freedom has now evolved into Women, Resistance, Freedom. And you hear it now in different university campuses, in different Iranian cities. So indeed, it is the women, as Mrs. Rajavi has said, that will ultimately bring down this regime, because they have been suppressed the most by it. And so in this sense, I think we are in a very, very opportune moment. I think, although I must say that the window of opportunity is not going to remain open indefinitely. And now that the mullahs are on their back heels, I think the international community has a lot to do. There's a lot to be done. You have to cut off their lifeline. And what is their lifeline? Oil, revenues from oil. And if, for example, the United States succeed in reducing Iranian oil exports to zero or to a very low level, that puts a strain on the mullahs, because they will not have the funds to boost their security forces and finance their proxies in the Middle East and elsewhere to wreak havoc and try to gain concessions from the West.
So let me ask you, what does the resistance want as far as, or do they want any military action against the Iranians, maybe airstrikes against the nuclear facilities? I know you want to have it taken down internally, but does the NCRI or the MEK have a position on American involvement against Iranian facilities if the negotiations don't come out to where the Americans think they should?
Well, naturally, Todd, the decision as to how to deal with the Iranian nuclear threat when it comes to the U.S., it's a decision that the United States must make. That's not something for us to advise. But if you were to ask me, and if you were going to ask me if I had 30 seconds in the elevator with the president, what would I tell him?
Right. That's a good question.
Yeah. I would tell him, look, Mr. President, you should make a public declaration that the people of Iran have the right to overthrow the regime in Tehran, and that this regime must go, period, and the people of Iran must be free. And we recognize the Iranian people's right to use whatever means available to them, whatever means, I emphasize, to topple it. And of course, that means they must have the ability to counteract the violence, the organized violence, the brutal violence imposed on them by the IRGC. That's my 30-second message. And I submit to you that that is going to be far more effective than any other tactic that one might contemplate, because we have seen, again, history is a good guide, that anything short of that will, first of all, not bring the desired end, but of course it has enormous risks regionally. Who knows what will happen? And so this is what we think that, and we have said consistently, in fact, as early as 2004, when Mrs. Rajavi visited the European Parliament, she said, we do not want any foreign intervention, military intervention, nor do we want the continued policy of appeasement with the regime. But
so the best thing in your mind would be to stop the appeasement policy. And
exactly. And unfortunately, I must say that even as we speak, this tendency, or perhaps the naive illusion, that somehow the mullahs will come around and sit down like a civilized partner and engage in meaningful negotiation, that I think is the danger that is facing us. We should not be beguiled by their overtures. If they were willing to negotiate, First of all, they would negotiate with their own people. Why 45 years of sheer suppression, clampdown, public executions, torture, cracking down on? They don't even allow like farmers, teachers, nurses to protest and demand their wages.
We've only got a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, what's the situation on the ground in Iran economically? Has it gotten, I know it's been bad, but is it improving, getting worse? I mean, did it get better, obviously, under the Biden regime with money that was fed to?
The money that the Biden administration gave to the mullahs was spent on propping up Assad, Hezbollah, the Houthis, other regime proxies in the region. And so it did not at all trickle down to the average Iranian. The food basket became shorter and smaller and smaller. Under the current president, it's amazing that every day he comes on TV and he says we have electricity shortages, we have power shortages, we have gasoline shortages. In fact, at some point a couple of months ago, they were forced to close all the schools, universities, public offices in 22 provinces, because they didn't have electricity, they didn't have gasoline to keep the places warm. And so Iran is facing chronic shortages in every aspect. The regime now is facing enormous water shortage as we speak. All of the dams are empty. Every sector of society now, they're protesting in the streets of Iran. And that is why you see this dramatic spike in the number of executions in the country, basically to put a lid on this protest. But I think this will backfire and will have a backlash, which is evidence in the rise in the activities of the resistance units across the nation.
So last question, are you getting any lower amount of repression in the media, as in the narrative that they've been in the Western media has been, describing the MEK and all of these stories of abuse in Albania and all of that? Is that still going on, or is it?
To be honest with you, I think now, I'm sure you have noticed, there has been a seismic change in the media, if you will, scene. That the legacy media have really lost their credibility.
Yes, that's why we're here. Yes,
but that is not to say that the regime doesn't try to use the legacy media, the mainstream media, to demonize the NCRI or the MEK. Interestingly, I'm glad you asked this question, because just this past week, a letter was sent to the UN Secretary General by a guy named Abdurrahman Mohammadian, who was a POW and joined the MEK in Iraq, and then he was brought to Albania, was there, and then he left Ashraf 3, and a New York Times reporter came from Berlin, interviewed him, and wrote a nasty article against the MEK, and he was the star of the article. Well, in his letter that he sent to UN Secretary General and a whole host of, he said, well, you know what? I was an agent of the Ministry of Intelligence. They were paying me 300 to 500 euros a month, and they told me to do an interview with the New York Times and I told him exactly what was told to me to parrot in my interview with the New York Times. And so I wonder if the New York Times will have the courage and the decency and the integrity to come and apologize for that hit piece that they wrote in 2022. But, the regime, they have said that the number one focus is to try to discredit and demonize the MEK and the NCRI, and they are calling actually on Western governments to detain and extradite NCRI and MEK members back to Iran to face maximum punishment, as they have said. But, we are doing what we can do, and I think at the end of the day, as Abe Lincoln said once, you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all the time. And so ultimately, I think facts and truth will prevail over lies and falsehoods.
One more quick question. Paris has been, has a lot of violence, a lot of crime right now, a lot of instability, I guess is the right word. Are you guys going to have another event this summer, global event in Paris, or what do you think?
Yes, there's going to be a global event. They're working on the details, and certainly we will let you know when that would be and how it will be organized. And but yes, there will be one. Of course, I hope, to be honest with you, that maybe in June we celebrate in Tehran as opposed to in Paris. But if it is Paris, then we'll have that, and we'll reach out to you when the time comes.
Ali, thank you for your time. Always a wealth of information. I really appreciate you carving out some time for us today. Thank you very much.
Of course, my pleasure, and hopefully we'll talk again, and keep up the very, very good work you're doing. We very much enjoy your shows.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The bird flu is circulating. We're getting more and more press, more fear mongering, more warnings about this. First, let's start with that. What say you on?
Well, what I say is it specifically is not circulating. It's in animals. There's one human, maybe two transmissions, no human-to-human transmission. And stand by, everybody. If there is some sort of sudden human-to-human transmission, you should immediately be suspicious that gain of function was involved with that. Just the fact that they're taking an animal virus and going nuts on it in the press and talking about it all the time, that to me leads me to believe that they have concerns that somebody is doing something with that virus, because this would not happen naturally, in my opinion.
Our world is changing rapidly. Many crucial systems we depend upon are collapsing. And the most important system that is failing is the food supply.
Mr. President, this Council is more than aware of the multiple challenges and threats the world is facing today. But the threat of famine, people starving slowly to death, must be a red line.
These food prices are going to keep going up and up, and they're going to keep feeding excuse after excuse, narrative after narrative.
Yeah,
you're going to have to get off that treadmill and start getting more autonomous with your own food growing.
You want to make sure that you can eat, because frankly, food is the biggest issue as we are going through these transitions.
But amidst the chaos, there is a path to resilience. Marjorie Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too, even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Growing your own food is like printing your own money. Get started today.
Welcome back to the SCIF. I hope you like the new format. We're going to continue to improve it as we go forward. And I really hope you enjoyed Colonel Maness and Ali Safavi of the NCRI, National Council of Resistance in Iran. Let me highlight this book one more time. We put out a year or so ago, Paying the Price, The Untold Story of the Iranian Resistance. You can get it at History of Books. They have signed copies, historyofbooks.com for our audio audience. And you can get it at L Todd Wood. There's signed copies there as well, ltoddwood.com, or anywhere books are sold. But it's really a story of what is going on in Iran with the people on the ground and what they've been going through literally for decades to fight this regime and the tyranny there. So check it out. There's some good endorsements from Lara Logan and General Vallely on the back of the book. You can find those on the website as well. I want to just run. I was one of the first journalists and to be allowed into, actually the first journalist to be allowed into the camp in Albania after the MEK, the Iranian Resistance, was removed. I think it was under Obama, to Albania from Iraq. They were on the border launching raids into Iran militarily and threatening the regime. And there was a whole story about that. You can get that in the book, The Untold Story of the Iranian Resistance, Paying the Price. But they were removed to Iran, thousands of them, and they built their own camp there. And I was the first journalist to go in there. It's a story that I think needs to be told, because I think there's ways to deal with Iran. And this is, I don't want to say selfish, but I don't want American boys and girls over there fighting a war when we have, there's a force inside the country that can take down the regime. So I'm going to bring this up. This is an interview, or actually a video that was done while I went to this camp. So I want you to see this and really understand what it is there in Iran or in Albania, which is the resistance. So I'm going to play this.
Civil engineer. Yeah, civil engineer from here. Yeah, I think that he's a friend of mine. Can you spell? Everybody know.
They made different things. So it was a year of very complicated situations. Sometimes you get frustrated. You can just leave it out. We are not obligated to do this, boy. We are doing this. So then there was the guys saying, no, we have to make.
Are using, they're spreading those fake apps in order to get information from the people. Those are not secure. But the Telegram official is completely secure. I mean,
just curious what your opinion was. But despite those fake telegrams.
And may I sing in a shadow. Oh no, not me. I did it my این کانون ترس پنهان تو با روی سرسخت رزم ما بنگر اینجا گورستان تو اینجا آفه پایان تو این کانون ترس پنهان
and they have experience for more than 10 years.
in the entire life. They took a 2-year course, and finally they were able.
This is the first one. This is Canadian passport.
So the reason I wanted to show you that is to show you that the Iranian Resistance, it's a huge story. They are essentially a paramilitary force. Hold on a second, let me get rid of that. They're essentially a paramilitary force that is ready to go to take down the regime from the inside. We don't need a major war, and we just need to support the people who want freedom in Iran on the ground. And you can find more about that, as I said previously, but I'll say it again. You can get Paying the Price, The Untold Story of the Iranian Resistance. It's available at History of Books or anywhere books are sold, or signed copies at ltoddwood.com. So we're going to take a quick break and come into the last segment. I want to talk Ukraine a little more, and hope you're enjoying the SCIF, and we'll be right back. The bird flu is circulating. We're getting more and more press, more fear mongering, more warnings about this. First, let's start with that. What say you on?
Well, what I say is it specifically is not circulating. It's in animals. There's one human, maybe two transmissions, no human-to-human transmission. And stand by, everybody. If there is some sort of sudden human-to-human transmission, you should immediately be suspicious that gain of function was involved with that. Just the fact that they're taking an animal virus and going nuts on it in the press and talking about it all the time, that to me leads me to believe that they have concerns that somebody is doing something with that virus, because this would not happen naturally, in my opinion.
Our world is changing rapidly. Many crucial systems we depend upon are collapsing. And the most important system that is failing is the food supply.
Mr. President, this Council is more than aware of the multiple challenges and threats the world is facing today. But the threat of famine, people starving slowly to death, must be a red line.
These food prices are going to keep going up, and they're going to keep feeding excuse after excuse, narrative after narrative.
Yeah.
Where you're going to have to get off that treadmill and start getting more autonomous with your own food growing.
You want to make sure that you can eat, because frankly, food is the biggest issue as we are going through these transitions.
But amidst the chaos, there is a path to resilience. Marjorie Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too. Even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Growing your own food is like printing your own money. Get started today.
So I hope you see that we're very anti-war here. We're not anti-war in the sense of defending the United States or our people around the world. We're anti-forever wars to keep the war going. I think it was 1984 that said the objective was not to end the war, but to keep the war going, some paraphrase of that. So that is what we're against, and that is why we're talking a lot about Iran. We don't want a major war there. We want to let the people inside the country take care of it on their own. And we don't want the war to continue in Ukraine. We want the killing to end. We have a lot of experience in Ukraine. I've talked a lot about that. I want you to go to cdm.press and check the top article right now on the arrest of the FBI agent Buma, which is tied into Ukrainians trying to get information to the United States almost a decade ago before the war, and that was shut down and covered up. And now they're trying to, or maybe the FBI is back looking at some of this information that was delivered to them. So the Ukrainian war is something we want to end. We have a lot of experience there. This is a photo of me. I was there during the invasion in a bomb shelter with a Ukrainian family for a week under a house out in Western Ukraine. I was on the ground there during the invasion, and we went west to Venetia, and I ended up walking across the Moldovan border. And just so you can see our credibility on this subject, I'm just going to play this real quick so that you can see we were there and know what we're talking about in Ukraine and why the war should end.
From Western Ukraine, we have been traveling all night for about 15 hours amongst thousands of cars fleeing the capital city of Kiev. I'm in a safe house west of the capital towards the Polish border. There are still klaxons and air raid signs going off often. And basically, the war is in full display here. There are anti-aircraft missiles firing often behind me up against, actually not anti-aircraft, anti-ballistic missiles being fired. Anyway, the war is hot. I think we were lucky to get out of Kiev before the airborne troops and the full assault came. So hopefully be to the border of West Ukraine to leave the country in the next few days once things cool down. Anyway, from what I hear, it's a very hot war across the whole country from what I can see on social media. Apparently 10,000 troops, airborne troops have landed in Kiev, and it's a big fight for the country. Anyway, we'll be back again shortly. Thanks.
So again, we have a lot of experience in Ukraine. We know what we're talking about. We know the war needs to end, and we need to know, and we know the corruption that is there. And we've been trying to report on this over and over and over. If you go to tsarizm.com, TSARIZM.com, let me bring that up real quick. It's our Eastern European side. It's the Tsarist Empire covered everything from Poland all the way to San Francisco. And so we're big on trying to get information of that region of the world to you, and that's our site to do that. Everything Eastern Europe is there, and Central Asia as well to a good extent. We also have our Balkan site, the balkan.press, where you can find a lot of information on Eastern Europe. And we're not going to continue this coverage, or we're not going to stop covering this area because we think it's highly important. A lot of people are trying to copy us there, but we do have people on the ground, and that's what we want to bring to the SCIF is reporters and direct access, like you just had with Ali Safavi, directly from Iran, on ways that are alternatives to the massive push for war all over the globe. We have, as we were mentioning earlier in the show, we have hundreds of thousands of troops already in the Middle East, mostly in naval assets, but we do have troops on the ground in Syria still, in other parts of the Middle East, and in Israel as well. That's a fact. There are Americans deployed there at different air bases. We know that for a fact. And we don't want a major war for our boys and girls in the Middle East. Again, we're big on defending the United States, but is what our military is supposed to do. But we don't want a major war. What's going on right now and could go on in Iran, and we want the Ukraine war to end, and we don't want a war in Taiwan either. We need, and we're praying for President Trump that he can continue to have the discernment to lead the nation forward and protect the future generations of Americans. Because I tell you one thing, we've done nothing for the people of Ukraine. We have depopulated the country, we've destroyed all their cities, and as Colonel Maness said earlier, we're not excusing Putin's behavior, but you have to understand that the war was, he was goaded into that. And yes, he had other options and shouldn't have invaded Ukraine and should have done other things before that. But the fact is that NATO was pushing for a war with him, Kamala Harris, the Biden administration. I think they were brought in by the Chinese to do that. They're bought and sold by the Chinese. And I think the whole game in this whole Ukraine war is to weaken the United States, destroy our military capability, and prevent us from being a free country to confront the Chinese global domination agenda. So we'll be back on the SCIF tomorrow, 10 a.m., Monday through Friday, Eastern a.m., and we're gonna have a great show. I don't exactly know what's yet. I mean, we spent a lot of time overnight putting the show together, and please support us, by the way. Support us with our no ad subscriptions. We have a lot of expenses right now. You can go to cdm.press. In the top right, it says subscribe with no ads. If you go there, you get access to all 13 sites with no advertisements. That's a huge thing for us, and we really need support financially. If you just want to make a donation, you can go top right, support us. You can send crypto, you can do a check, you can do Zelle, you can do a credit card transaction, but we need assets to keep growing and to keep bringing you the kind of news that you only get here. And we're proud of it. We're going to continue to do it. The team is working hard, and we need to continue to support them as well. So we'll see you tomorrow morning on the SCIF at 10 a.m. And thank you for joining us on the new version of the show. Hope you like it. Send us any comments you have, good or bad. We're big people. We can take it. So we'll see you tomorrow.